class 8th when my father brought home a copy of a business magazine with Indra Nooyi's face smiling from the cover page. Now, back in those days, and I'm sure it is the case even today, Indra Nooyi was the go-to inspiration for just about every girl. So my father handed over the copy to my mother with a statement saying he hoped to see my face on it someday. And that is the exact moment where I knew my fate was sealed. I was going to be an entrepreneur. Age 13, on one hot, sultry summer day, is where I had my first entrepreneurial brainwave. I decided I would start a Nimbu Pani business across Mumbai. I shared this grand plan of mine with my brother, who was equally enthusiastic about it. We both agreed that this was the right way of ensuring I could replace Indra Nooyi's face with mine. No prizes for guessing what happened when I discussed this at home. My parents were clearly not enthused with the visionary in me. They rubbished the idea and they said, pay attention to academics, which is exactly what I did, despite the fact that we had the freedom to make our own decisions. Over the next few years, I did very well academically and professionally and worked with the talent acquisition and business transformation functions with some very marquee names like JP Morgan Chase, Hutchison Whampoa, the Temasek Holdings. But somewhere in those years, I lost my father, found a husband, but what didn't change was the aspiration and the desire to build something from scratch and leave my imprint on the universe. Not soon after, in the economic downturn of 2008, 2009, we know what happened during those years. There was a lot of madness around, there was joblessness, there was chaos, and it is this time that a chance conversation with my brother set me off on an entrepreneurial journey. I decided I would start a human resources consulting firm, one that would bridge the talent gap in India. Now, at the onset, it obviously seemed like an outrageous and crazy idea to start a people-centric business in times like that, when that was the one function that was most impacted. However, I did eventually take the proverbial bull by its horns, and I did in 2009 jumped into the entrepreneurial abyss to start the first business under what is today called a Stalwart world. I had barely worked for about 4 years by then, and except for my desire to build something from scratch and leave my imprint, I had nothing else to fall back on. But now that we had started, the days were longer, nights were longer, but we went about building Stalwart brick by brick. Very soon, we became the trusted partner of choice for some of the largest companies in the world, fulfilling their hiring requirements. We very quickly also diversified into various other people transformation functions, quickly becoming the darling for the entire talent acquisition space. And that's typically how the journey started. I'd been very, very clear at that point in time that the entire aspiration of what we were building was to help the talent acquisition community. Cut to 2022, under the flagship of Stalwart World today, there are 4 distinct businesses that we run. Our oldest, of course, happens to be our talent acquisition organization, where we work with some of the largest organizations in the world. 2, we run a learning and development organization, where we fulfill learning requirements using performing arts. 3, we run a wellness organization, where we work towards improving employee productivity by focusing on their wellness. But it is this 4th business of mine that I'm extremely passionate about, and I'd like to discuss that here today. This is a company called a Stalwart Business Consortium. This happens to be India's first and only of its kind route to market and sales implementation organization. We work very closely with FMCG brands in 2 spaces, food and beverage and home and personal care brands, such that while they can focus on production, manufacturing, adding more products to their portfolio, they shouldn't and wouldn't have to worry about who's going to take them to the market. So Stalwart builds, operates, manages the entire unorganized and chaotic space of the offline sales and distribution space for them. They say that one good deed leads to another, and that is exactly how Stalwart Business Consortium saw shape and form. In 2016, we were commissioned by a very large FMCG organization to bring on board a supply chain leader for them. And as a part of my standard practice, I would engage very often with the brand as well as these candidates to make sure that the right balance and the right candidate was put in the right job. It is a casual comment during this discussion when we were talking about the unorganized and the rigmaroles of actually setting up a sales and distribution channel for FMCG, is where we realized that it is a Herculean task for any FMCG brand that is entering the market for the first time to find its feet in the retail shelf. And that is where I knew that there was a stumbling problem in the industry, a problem that has been around for the longest number of years but untapped. So in 2017, I got my brother, the same partner in crime in my Nibu Pani business, to quit his PSU job, and you know how PSU jobs are. So I made him quit that, take over the operational efficiencies of our existing businesses, and I plunged into designing a business model that would solve the problem statement that I had just identified. Now, if you're an FMCG brand owner, or if you know one, you'll realize that while building a solid and robust sales and distribution network is like a rat race, finding a retail shelf space is no less than a termite fight. But it is winning this termite fight that decides the fate of a brand, right? It is this fight which decides whether the brand would make it or break it. I knew that through my extensive research, I had already identified a business problem that needed some level of addressal. And I went about developing a tech-assisted route-to-market sales solution, one that would eventually undergo several levels of iteration to address the major challenges that any FMCG brand was experiencing. Over the next 3 years, my team and I spoke to a zillion brand owners, distributors, retailers, and even consumers to build an only of its kind, extremely ambitious, one of its kind route-to-market business assisted with technology that would allow us to scale and address every single stakeholder's problem statement in the value chain. Let me share some startling numbers with you, things that I came across while we were in the process of building this one of its kind business model. There was an ET Now study published in 2020 which spoke about the fact that 33,000 new brands were looking at entering the retail market over the next few years. What was very insightful there was that the retail business was expected to grow from 4 lakh crores in 2019 to 10 lakh crores in 2025. And what's even more insightful is that 80% of this business was expected to come from the retail market. Now, I'm going to leave you to do the math to figure out the market size of the problem that we were looking at solving. The pragmatic in me, of course, knew that maybe 80% was an obnoxiously optimistic number, but we still knew that we were on the right track to actually make sure that the problem and the business statement that we were looking would eventually end up tallying. So this basically is how the scope of work turned out. Today, as we speak, the stalwarts at Stalwart have managed to build 3 clear deliverables and have lived up to this commitment. As we speak, at this point in time, the business models are evolving to meet 3 big asks. One, we're looking at building India's largest and widest sales distribution and retail network. 2, we're building India's fastest route-to-market company, which would ensure that brands actually reach the retail market in 45 days flat. And 3, we're looking at building India's largest multi-brand sales organization with the largest number of feet on street on sales guys in the market. When I look back, I clearly realize that there are just 2 attributes which have contributed to the growth of what we've seen. One, of course, is the timing. We spotted an opportunity in something that has been a perennial problem in the industry, but we moved very fast, we moved very aggressively, and we capitalized on the first mover's advantage, and that is the reason why there has been immense scale that has come into that business. Second, it is the ability to execute on an idea. And all of us have ideas, right? But an idea is only as good as its execution. And that has been the standard adage that we've been able to stick to in the DNA of what we've built in Stalwart. Of course, being a member of ASCENT, in a sense, not paying me to say this, but I've been a member of ASCENT and I have my trust group guys sitting there, and they've been amazingly supportive and ensuring that I continuously stick to the goals and the visions that I've been able to design for myself. In the last couple of months, I've been fortunate to have the time, attention, and headspace of some industry veterans where as a part of our fundraise process, and I've realized that the admiration and the the validation of the business model that we've managed to build is a clear-cut situation where we would actually be able to declare very openly that I know that the next decade is the decade of the stalwart roar. We're actually building something that's going to be the only of its kind in the country, and I look forward to sharing more such success stories with everyone here on the platform. Thank you very much.